Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Emory Climate Talks. My name is Eri Saikawa, and I'm an associate professor of environmental sciences and the director of science policy and community engaged research at the Resilience and Sustainability Collaboratory at Emory University. Emory Climate Talks is made possible by our anonymous donor that supports our trip to the United Nations climate change negotiations. And Emory Climate Talks is in partnership with the Department of Environmental Sciences and the Resilience and Sustainability Collaboratory at Emory University. In my class, we have been talking about how things are so intertwined. Plastics are now found everywhere, and microplastics are becoming such a major problem. I heard this week that even the mask that we are wearing now is producing microplastics. And my students told me yesterday that plastics are used in frog feed as the leftover packaged food from groceries are simply grinded to create feed for frogs that we could potentially be eating. It struck me that the producer was explaining that this was a better way to reduce waste. Yes, food waste is a major issue, but to tackle climate change, there is no easy solution. It is sometimes very hard to find hope, and it is no surprise that we see so many news articles related to climate anxiety nowadays. Today, I am so excited because I think we have a speaker who can really give us the hope that we need and the potential actions that we could be seeking. Before we go into today's program, I want to thank everyone that works on Emory Climate Talks. Leah Thomas does the wonderful newsletter and all the coordination for the talk. Kiara Brust and Claire McCarthy do all the social media posts and advertisements through various means. Thank you so much for all the work that you do behind the scenes, Leah, Kiara, and Claire. And thank you to everyone that is here. We are so glad to have you all and are proud to have this community. So let me go over some logistics. Please use the chat function to address any questions you may have to the speaker at any point during the talk. We will have the time for Q&A at the end after the presentation, and I will encourage anybody who is interested in speaking up to raise their hands and unmute themselves when you are called. If you prefer, you are more than welcome to type in your questions in the chat function as well. Please feel free to use the chat function to share any resources you may be aware of, as we have been doing in the past. Most of the past talks are on a YouTube channel, and you can subscribe at youtube.com/c/Emory Climate Talks. Today's talk will also be available on the website by next week or so. It is my absolute pleasure today to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Ramón Cruz. Mr. Cruz is the president of the Sierra Club. I think no introduction is necessary for him or for Sierra Club, which is the nation's oldest and largest environmental organization with 3.8 million members with 64 chapters, including the one at Emory, all over the US. And we just heard, and Leah just posted, I think Leah is going to post soon, that there is a new feature of him on the New York Times today. So you can read all about him on that article as well. But Mr. Cruz graduated from American University in Washington, DC. And turns out that we were in the same building at different times at Princeton University, studying science, technology, and environmental policy. I am grateful to Marina Gutierrez, one of our COP delegation alumna, who put us in touch last year when we were finalizing the Emory delegation to the COP26. As you can imagine, Mr. Cruz has so much experience in sustainability, environmental policy, urban planning, energy, and climate change. He is from Puerto Rico, and I believe he is joining us from there today. And he has worked so much in the public sector in Puerto Rico. And not only that, he has worked in the NGOs, including the Environmental Defense Fund, the Partnership for New York City, and the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy. He has also been a consultant at both national and international institutions, including the World Bank and the German Agency for International Cooperation. I can go on and on with what he has achieved, but I would like to give the floor to him so you can actually get to hear more directly from him. So thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Cruz, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Eric, and Can people hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. Well, let me know otherwise. But yeah, well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are. It's an honor to have been invited to these Emory Climate Talks. As Eri said, my name is Ramón Cruz, and I'm the president of the Sierra Club. I use pronouns he, him, his. And I'm right now calling you were right, from Boriquen, which is the Taino name of the island known today as Puerto Rico. However, I'm usually based in the unceded land of the Canarsie people, otherwise known as Brooklyn in New York, which is part of the Greater Lenape territory. And thanks again for being here. I hope you're all safe and healthy, and that your loved ones are safe and healthy in what continues to be, such uncertain times. I wish I was in Atlanta today, talking to you in person. So I'm sorry not to be there. Would have been so good, of course, to hear your perspectives and how, your careers at this time of history, which is certainly very important. I don't know if how many. I assume that it's a lot of university students in this in the audience. So I'll directly address that. Probably other things come up in the discussion, but I am. I'm sure that this experience in uncertainty, shape a lot of, what you're doing, how you learn your classes. But I'm sure like great people will emerge from this experience that, will try to make the world a better place. So, I look forward with, to see what comes from many of you. And I want to also, I guess, take a moment to recognize that, assuming many of you are students, to also recognize the privilege that there's in this Zoom room, and know that recognize that many people in this planet are not nearly as lucky, not as privileged as we are, and and of course, this is not a lecture to make you feel all powerful or guilty about that privilege, but just a reminder of what you do about it, and what you do with it is what is important. And you, of course, cannot change, where you're coming from, but you can do a whole lot with what you're given, And I think that, with privilege comes big responsibilities, and I hope that you're up for that challenge. And, again, this is not necessarily what you came to hear about, but I have this opportunity and the privilege to talk to you, and I have a captive audience. So, I'm using it. But I just think it's unfair when people, especially in the moment that many of you are, to think that that everyone is self-made, or that they got there by themselves, and no one does. You're a product of a network, and that supported you and that pushed you to succeed, and have, I happen to believe that, it is good for us to give back, and it is important, especially that you cast a vote, and that, to remember that we have a system that has made it possible for us to be here, and to have that privilege of education, and it is important to ensure that, we try as hard to lift everyone up. And it is important because, you're in Georgia, and you vote. And so I want to thank you for, bringing two great people to the Senate. I met yesterday personally, well, not personally, I guess it was in Zoom, with Senator Warnock. I think he's great, very inspiring, and I know it's easy to be skeptical and frustrated in what is happening today, especially, for us in the climate world. There's so much hope, and we had so much hope on the Build Back Better agenda, and the Biden administration agenda. I would say to you all that it is not finished, even though you will hear less of Build Back Better as a name, but a lot of the climate issues, we hope to bring it up for a vote and to make it a reality. But it's a reminder that, midterms elections are coming, and that because of one vote, we couldn't see this transformative reality transformative, initiatives as a reality. And so it is important to remain active and to remain involved. So I hope the U.S. and the world counts with Georgia. So I hope many of you are remaining, very involved. Now, in terms of, I guess I use already a lot of my time, and I haven't even started speaking from what the organizers had asked me to, but basically I will divide it more or less in three aspects. One, they asked me to talk about what made me an environmentalist and being involved in climate issues. Then, the Sierra Club, a bit about the Sierra Club and where we are today, and then some reflections about COP26. So, to the first point in terms of what made me an environmentalist, I think a big aspect was my mom. She was a nun before having me, and having me and my sisters, but it wasn't so much on the rituals. But she came of age, in a moment in the 60s with the liberation theology in Latin America, and having seeing the purpose of public service and service, high up there. So I think that was a big influence. And of course, nature and growing up in Puerto Rico and appreciation of nature. But I think, when it comes to what made me an environmentalist and to choose that as a career, I think it was probably where many of you are today, in your college careers. And I remember I was a big fan of social movements, especially in Latin America in the 20th century. And once I had the opportunity to meet this amazing woman, she was a former guerrilla from Uruguay, and she was expressing how much, we met at a film festival at American University, and she was very frustrated with her generation and all the aspirations that they had when they took on weapons, the armed struggle, etc., to change the world, and then how often, political egos change that, and very frustrated on how then the movement becomes more, parallel to protagonists, and then, and used by political parties and special interests. And I remember her saying that how she would dedicate, if she would be where she was, when she was starting her, career, or being more productive to society, she would choose the environment, partly because it is a faceless movement or a leaderless movement. And if you think about it, especially in the modern era of the environmental movement, there's maybe Greta Thunberg is the closest thing to an icon or a celebrity. And for the most part, it is actually a movement without protagonists, but that the cause itself is what is important, and that's something that I agree and have remembered constantly in my career, because again, none of us are indispensable, but the cause itself is what it's needed, and what you need is often very committed citizens, and group of people, and the power of working together, what really can affect change, and not necessarily just one person. So in that regard, I think the more we can focus on the issues and less on specific people, the better it is for the movement and for society in general. So that's a bit, and the rest Harry already mentioned it in my bio at the beginning. So I'll switch a little bit more to the Sierra Club, and as many of you know, the Sierra Club is the largest and oldest, and I would argue most influential environmental grassroots organization in the nation. And so sometimes it's difficult to think, how can it be that a national is also grassroots? But But I'll say a little bit, in terms of how we work, and that working together to affect change is very important. In our 130 years, of the organization, we have almost 4 million members and supporters, and we have actually worked on real change. From protecting lands and in all the movement that led to all the key laws, to protect air, water, wildlife, and advancing climate solutions, etc. From in the urban areas, in the wild areas, and so it has been a very important organization. We have about 900 staff with 64 chapters, and that's how we're able to penetrate, in terms of local issues and grassroots. And we're in every state in the nation. We have an office, including in Puerto Rico, where I am right now. And yeah, so I hope you get involved. You can join for as little as $15 a year, and get a cool gift with that. But of course, more importantly, join your local issues and work with local community groups. And so again, as long as you're contributing, somewhere, it doesn't have to be the Sierra Club. But anyway, drinking some water in one of our gifts. But the Sierra Club is a very democratic organization, and our board of directors is elected. There's elections every year, and yeah, it's it comes from the membership, so it's a volunteer-led organization. I'm honored, of course, to be the first person of Latino origin, to occupy this position in the 130 years of the organization, all the way, from the founder, John Muir, in 1892. And I want to talk a little bit about the history of the club, which is, of course, intertwined with the history of the environmental movement in this country, and I would argue in the world. And remember, in the origins, it was, basically the U.S. was coming out of the Civil War. It was the end of slavery. It was, Western expansion and a lot of mining, and the Industrial Revolution. It was, in full swing. So it was very important that many of these places, there was a movement that was created to preserve many places that we hold sacred today, and it was held sacred by other people, and especially, and that's when it was a bit controversial when we were dealing with our, reckoning as many places in the U.S. after the murder of George Floyd, and things came up in that analysis, and the places where we had issued harm, because sometimes we glorify all the national parks, but we have to remember that, of course, there was actually other people there before that held those places sacred, and there was a relocation of indigenous populations in many of this. It was places where people of different origins and former slaves were not really, able to get there. And so there were, this is all, very relevant, of course, because sometimes, again, we tend to think like, well, everything was great, and many of the issues remain here today, 130 years later. I think, after the first half of the 20th century, we moved more from conservation into, in the 60s, and then, all the social movements and civil rights that were happening, and rivers caught on fire, and the effects of DDT and mining and nuclear awareness, and all this, and that is what really gave birth to what is more the modern environmental movement, with Earth Day, in April 1970, and 50 years basically or over 50 years now of all these laws, etc., that were really transformative for many places. And so the Sierra Club has accompanied that throughout that and helped shape many things. But we have to recognize that also this movement was very white, very privileged, very wealthy, and soon there were issues, and it was at odds with many of the local organizations or places that were neglected, and so the typical national groups were not necessarily seeing always eye to eye, and sometimes many of you probably don't remember, or maybe depends who was active 15 years ago or so, when there was a possibility of passing national legislation with trading systems, and many of the EJ groups, environmental justice organizations, opposed that and were at odds with the environmental movement, partly because the environmental movement was, well, let's do this, let's have a national scheme, but in reality, in the local local communities knew that all these trading licenses were going to concentrate in areas that were going to be impacted even more acutely, and so that is really I think in the 90s and in early 2000s that there was much more understanding and much more conversation, but also clashes between the environmental and the environmental justice movement, and because this is all very difficult to, especially for those communities. And there was this racism, the environmental racism that it's there, sometimes at the surface, but many times much more ingrained, And so that is why I think, in this moment, the Sierra Club is taking much more steps to become an anti-racist organization and convinced that we cannot really win the climate, the climate battle, the battle against climate change and the climate crisis, unless we deal also with that. Because, again, thinking back in that McCain-Lieberman bill that I told you of 15 years ago, there was this this notion that we can allow certain places to be polluted for the gain of society as a whole. But that's the fallacy. Ultimately, if we're able to sacrifice those locations, if we're able to sacrifice a whole watershed in order to frack, fossil gas out of everything for the betterment of society, then we're sacrificing also the people in those places, And we cannot have notions of, people that can be disposed or that can be sacrificed unless there is an ideology based on supremacy and racism. And so that's why, we in order to really fight the crisis, we need to fight everything that contributes to it. And so I think, in the last decade or so, the Sierra Club has moved. We adopted the HEMES principles of democratic organizing, that is much more an approach to organizing and to be involved in communities that we're invited, that we go with in a spirit of partnership, of collaboration, of mutuality. And I'm not saying it's a perfect world. We're aware of the relative size that we have within the movement, but it's a different approach and a journey that we have decided to take on. And so it's something that I think it's very necessary. I'll stop there, and hopefully there will be more discussion on this. But in the last segment, then I will talk a bit more about COP26 in Glasgow. I probably, some people in this call were there, and we all have, of course, our own personal, impressions of it. I was, in general, quite positive about it, contrary to many of the things that we saw in the press, and so I must say that it's also, partly that assessment is because I have been involved since the years of the Copenhagen Summit. So for the last 12 years, I have been participating on this. And so it's difficult to always see this as a one-off kind of meeting, but more of a process and a continuum, no? And sometimes with its ups and downs. And certainly, with after the debacle that was the Trump administration, it was certainly very good to see, a U.S. delegation that was interested in pushing the process forward instead of holding it back. It's as we know, we should have been where we are decades ago. We knew how to get there. The science was clear already, but we still lack a political will, as we're seeing now, with the senator from West Virginia, and how, special interests basically is holding us back, no? But it was important in terms of advancing the Paris Agreement. It is not nearly where we should be, but we have to again think of this. Imagine the Paris Agreement took 20 years to come, to become a reality, and it's still in that process, But we have to see the Paris Agreement as an anomaly in the history of the world, to have almost 200 factions, often with completely opposite views and consequences to their own interests, to agree on an ambitious goal to face the biggest threat that humanity, has ever faced. And, it's really an improbable miracle. And so, it was thanks to the efforts of thousands of people, people like all of you in this call, from the students that are protesting in the streets to the negotiators and the scientific community and everything, collaborating towards that common goal. So, even though you have had very dark periods like the Trump years, that ended that US-China, I'm very sorry that seems to be a fire alarm. I don't think it's a big deal, but can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but do you need to escape?
I don't think so. I don't see any smoke, but should be fine. Okay, so let me see if I can maybe go to another room that that might be easier. It might be shielded a bit more from the.
Yeah, please make sure you're safe.
What?
Please make sure you're safe first.
No, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. Anyway, so about the COP, just to finish with with that thought, that I think we're not nearly where we should be, but certainly it was good to see the U.S. Kind of like leading again together with other countries. It was during the time there, of course, we were very critical, and we were trying for them to push as much as possible, in terms of putting money on the table, in terms of adaptation, in terms of a loss and damage mechanism. But ultimately, there was significant progress. There was, a pledge to deal with deforestation. There was a commitment to deal with methane. That was something unexpected, a year ago. There was the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, that is gaining momentum, and led by small countries like Costa Rica and Denmark, and also what I think, it's the beginning, of the end of coal. No, it's like writing the last chapter in the book of coal, because, with the Bloomberg announcement to take the Beyond Coal campaign that we have had in the Sierra Club, thanks to donors like him, that really right now we have, over half of the coal plants in the US either close or scheduled to close in the next few years. And so that is something big. And so taking that to an international level, it's really positive. Also to have, people were like, well, it's phase down versus, going phase out coal, etc. Ultimately the fact that it's there, it's a big sign. It's basically signaling, coal is over. It's a technology of the 19th century, and we need to move on. And so that was clear from this COP26. So all in all, I think it was positive. It was good to have adults negotiating again and having conversations that are difficult, but in that way, I feel that it was an inspiring moment. So I'll stop there. We're already in a half-hour mark, so that there's times to have conversation. And I think I'll go back to my other location because the alarm is no longer going.
Hey, I'm glad that the alarm is not there anymore. But yeah, thank you so much for this very insightful conversation. I think, you really started off the talk with a very important remark about the privilege and how do we use our privilege. That's the challenge on us. And I think that is a really good reminder for us on that. And the history of Sierra Club and about the COP, there was so much very fruitful. I think we can expand any of that into a very nice discussion. And there is actually already a question coming in. So I would like to thank you first for this great remark and then move on to the question. Sujita is already raising her hand. So yeah, Sujita, do you want to go ahead and ask the question?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So you talked a lot about like discrimination and how that affects climate change. And that's something I've really been thinking about recently. And I was wondering, like, I specifically have been thinking about, like, historically, there are certain places that industrialized early and like took advantage of other areas. And so like, because of that, specific areas in the world are more affected by climate change now and don't have the resources really to be able to like control their carbon like emissions and all of that. I was wondering what you think and like your thoughts about if there are greater effects of climate change in like different areas of the world because of discrimination, either historically or like even now, like if you can think of examples, like modern time examples of how other areas are affected.
Well, thanks for that question, Srijita. I think sorry if I mispronounced your name, but yeah, there was, I think I understand correctly, and also in the chat there was a noise that I couldn't. Sometimes it was difficult to understand, but yeah, in terms of discrimination, yeah, and that's why we have been very vocal about it. It has brought a lot of pushback, especially from the more traditional corners of the organization and of the environmental movement. But again, as I mentioned, I'm convinced we cannot get there because I think you continue seeing examples all over the place. I think fracking is an example of this tension. It is fracking and fossil gas that more or less allowed the Obama administration to negotiate Paris because of the compared to coal, the emissions were going to be down. And so, but there has been so much damage created by that. So it's an example of that discrimination, because a lot of these places where we frack gas is they're poor. They're where poor people live, and often without political power, often people of color, and so we're willing to go with that, and that's not acceptable. So especially when there is a moment where we can go beyond that, and focus on renewable energy. That doesn't mean that renewable energy will be, all flowers and great. You know, there's going to be, of course, this tension. The challenge is more how we minimize that tension, and how we're sure that we're lifting as many people and discriminating against less people. So yeah, I think unfortunately we are continuing to see these kind of examples all over.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, there are several hands up. I know that Jared put the question first, and I think he is not able to speak up right now, so I will read that. He says, in a country as large and diverse as the US, is it effective and or practical to enact policies across the entire country? Or would regional policy be more effective?
Well, great question, Jared. Thanks. I think it's very, it's ideal, of course, to have policies that apply to the whole country. However, it's almost never the way that progressive policies have taken effect in the US. In the whole history, it's like, take as an example the Voting Rights Act that just failed to go through Congress. Ideally, it would be better to have that kind of legislation and apply everywhere. Unfortunately, this is a federation, and there are good things and bad things. So, is it the end of the whole debate that didn't go through Congress? That was opposed by Senator Manchin and Sinema? No, but it makes it much more difficult, because now the 29 states or so that have, issued voting laws, and you're all in Georgia, so you can speak at first hand, that means it's an uphill battle, because then we have to look into, 20 plus different places where we have to work with that. So it's the same with legislation. And when you have had very backwards administrations like the W. Bush and especially Trump, then a lot of the action needs to happen in the states, needs to happen in local communities. So that's why you cannot really lose sight of the opportunities, and also where you have to build up that momentum from. It's only when states, when a group and more progressive states start doing things that then it can become a reality in the whole nation. And that's the importance, for example, of the California waiver, where many things have led in terms of environmental issues. And that's why it was a big focus of the Trump administration to end up with that, to end up with the possibilities of states imagining a different future than the federal reality. So all of that is very important.
Okay, let's go to Ali next.
Hi, yeah, so I know you talked about how with privilege comes a lot of responsibility. And I guess my group right now, we're studying synthetic meat and how shifting to a plant-based diet. And I guess we realized that even though it does help with climate change, things like synthetic meat is very expensive, and even more sustainable things that will help the environment are more expensive than things that aren't sustainable. So I was wondering if you think that climate change and climate justice is something that is more of a luxury for people that are privileged, or I guess how would you approach this question if you aren't privileged and you don't have access to resources to, I guess, be more sustainable?
Okay, well, thanks, Ali. If I understand correctly, the question is how can we use our privilege in that advantage, or
I guess it's I feel like climate change is something that only people with more privilege have the opportunity to really think about, or even have the resources to really actively do something for.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly, again, the fact that we have an education, and that the fact that we can have access to internet, and that we can get to know about all these issues are, of course, our privilege, and we cannot change that. I don't think it's only people with privilege that get to do something about this, but of course, access to things that enable you to create a campaign, etc., against it certainly helps a lot. And so that's why it is important for people with the resources or organizations like the Sierra Club with the infrastructure to be able to get involved, that we become allies, but that we don't just parachute in a place just because we think it's right, but that we're that we, when we get involved, we're sure that we can become partners and not necessarily lead or present our own views without the local communities involved. So yeah, I mean, it's a matter of privilege, but that doesn't mean that it's not a reason to of course get involved. And again, the journey to become better allies, it's in one way direction, but it's not by any means like with lack of obstacles and stepping into problems, etc. But yeah, I believe that we can use those resources and that privilege for the improvement of others in society.
Yeah, thank you. I was also have a really quick follow-up question. I was wondering, what are some things that we can just do as students, I guess, to help or I guess be part of this process?
Well, I mean, if you ask me right now, since a lot of my focus has been on Build Back Better and passing federal legislation, I would say that, of course, being involved, because Georgia is so important for that. However, I would say that, be involved as local as you can. It's great, and there's always an organization that you can either volunteer, get closer, contribute resources, and all that. So in that regard, yeah, it's very important. I'm sure there's plenty of things in Atlanta. If not, contact our Sierra Club chapter office there. There's going to be a lot of work that all of you can volunteer in.
Yeah, so Cole was also asking a similar question, I believe, about Georgia. And so Leah put the Sierra Club local chapter and events especially for that. So if anybody is interested, please check them out and join them. I think that was Narika's hands. I don't see them anymore. Narika,
no, yeah, I was raising it. Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello. Yeah, my name is Narika. I am always like trying to be cognizant of like where indigeneity fits into environmentalism. And we recently, or was it recently? I guess last semester we had a speaker talk about, I forgot his name, Ari, the Native American speaker that we had from New Mexico. Yeah. His talk was really humbling, just as somebody who is brown, who is Latina, and just trying to navigate spaces beyond the regular communities that I'm in, especially when I go to like higher education, like Emory, and like and entering the work field. So when I have conversations about environmentalism and how that looks for me, it's like, it's always a fluid kind of dynamic across whatever sphere you're coming across. And so how do I phrase this? Just recognizing like my own, background, how do you think I can put, I'm sorry. Just what project should I be looking out for while I like graduate from Emory, or like should I try to focus on like the governmental aspect of policy, or like pay attention to leading conferences like COP, because that's really important? Or like, is grassroots always going to be a better way to approach conversations, if that makes any sense?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, of course it does. Thanks, Narika, for that question. I mean, you have to, of course, find out. It's always a mix of what's needed and what you're passionate about. But it is important to, I guess, to have a plan. And of course things change along the way. But in terms of saying if there's one thing more important than another, that I cannot say what should be that focus. But also I don't think it's good or true approach, because ultimately all parts are very important, and within our organization, I feel that there's always this tension of, between the organizing and more grassroots organizing part, and the more policy, a bit more on the grass tops. And to affect change, you need both approaches. And so that's why I don't think you have to be to feel what it's more, what you can contribute more in terms of skill and passion, but certainly appreciate all the parts that are contributing to a movement. I have been much more on the policy side of things. That doesn't mean that that's the most relevant part. Most of the time the press wouldn't be interested in me in my computer sending emails. That's not sexy at all. You need that passion, those people yelling in the street to call the attention. When it comes to finding solutions, I don't know how much of that debate can really shape one, but it's not that doesn't mean that one is more important than the others. In the Trump years, where we were in the courts almost every week, with new cases, and trying to put obstacles to the Trump agenda. Of course, we prefer to be much more constructive than that. But, again, all of the parts were very important and very much appreciated and part of the movement. That doesn't mean that, again, everybody is just holding hands and singing Kumbaya, but, you have to appreciate that everybody is contributing. So, with that question, I'm sure, wherever you go, you will be contributing great things, as long as you're giving back. And I think it's very important to be involved and give back.
Thank you.
Okay, I see John R's hand up. Great to see you, John R.
Thank you, Ramon. And thank you, Ari. John R. Seidel, work for the city as our director of sustainability. I had a question, actually two questions. One is regenerative agriculture is something that has gotten a lot of in the last 2 years with COVID, Kiss the Ground, Biggest Little Farm. I wanted to see, we have this farm bill that's coming up, but if Sierra Club is strategically aligning itself on anything regenerative ag, any legislation, etc. on that work. And then secondly, which is one that I just like to ask everybody, what are the top 3 actions? You got a lot of people, a lot of young people that want to be part and want to act for solutions. And so what are the top 3 actions that we can take today that would help Sierra Club and our collective sustainability goals?
Mm-hmm. All right, great questions. The first one was on regenerative agriculture, right? Yeah, it's great. I actually, a few months ago, I was moderating a panel with the directors of Kiss the Ground movie. That it's actually a great film about regenerative agriculture, and also very revealing of how we had destroyed soil and topsoil. And so yeah, in that regard, I think there's no doubt that Sierra Club is supportive of that. So I'm sure that the Georgia chapter, if it's not involved, they will probably be involved. Of course, we delegate that it's really the Georgia chapter and the volunteers that lead the Georgia chapter that will have a say on that, on what are the legislative focus of the chapters, etc. And it's only in particular moment that then the national Sierra Club gets involved. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think within the Biden administration, there's also a big focus towards that now, and a big opportunity, and also a big opportunity to leave that model of corporate agriculture and focus on small farmers that are much better for local economies, etc. So in that way, yeah, completely in support. 3 actions. As inspiring as the new generation is, which is much more clear and much more, I feel, it's great that we have all these young people without any debate about, if this is real or not. I think, the first action that I would say is talking to your elders. Be sure to make that as a commitment to explain things better for them, because their vision is very cloudy, and so that I think is very important. The other is enlist as many people as you can in your peers to vote, because the future and your lives and your future depends on that. And the rest, I would say get involved in a local organization that supports any kinds of green initiatives. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, we are actually going to be having a Kiss the Ground big movie screening, I believe on the Earth Day, in partnership with Science ATL. So if any of you are interested, I hope you will join us as well. So there
great.
are,
And if you need contact the producers or the directors, and they might be willing to have a Q&A or something.
that would be great. Thank you so much, Ramon. And there are several more questions. So Lydian is asking, you alluded to infighting and controversy within the Sierra Club and among its supporters. Do you think this dialogue should be avoided given the consequences of delayed action, or is it essential and beneficial in the long run?
Well, I can give another talk on that whole question because it has certainly been a very controversial part of the in the last couple of years, especially after that summer of 2020, summer of reckoning and all that. And I mean, I could go on and on because we have received so much responses, threats as well. A lot of some things just out of a hate group playbook, but also a lot of support. And I would say a big chunk of our more traditional supporters saying basically stay in your lane. We're environmentalists, our mission is to protect nature, let's stay on that. And there's an op-ed I wrote in the San Francisco Chronicle that about that. I don't know if it's under a paywall, so I don't know if Leah, if you will be able to see it. But basically, I think it's not possible. I think it's for me, there's no other lane. It's I come from Puerto Rico. I come from a colonized place. Where people are often discriminated against, and where coming to the States was certainly not necessarily a choice. I have 4 uncles that fought in the Korean War. One of them died. And still, there are many things that are happening in Puerto Rico, like the bombing in the island of Vieques, or, experimenting with different chemicals, etc. So it's really going to other progressive issues that makes us imagine a different reality, I'm of mixed race, and in that article I talk how, before 1967, my parents wouldn't have been a possibility in many places. I wouldn't have been, invited to be part of the Sierra Club back then. So certainly the world has changed, and so staying in my lane for me, it's I cannot think of something more than a broadened vision for the environmental movement, and to recognizing where in the past we have affected harm. It's just one step to making people like me and many others feel welcome. And so yeah, for me, focusing on those issues, not focusing because we focus on so many things. It's just that because it's controversial, became very relevant, and many people put their attention on it. But ultimately, I think it's important to recognize that we had former people that owned other people in our origins. There were people that were eugenicists that thought that one race was superior to another. And so bringing that up doesn't want to make me erase 130 years of history, but it's important to recognize that in order to also say I'm sorry, and let's move together towards a future that we aspire, and an organization that we aspire, and an organization that is anti-racist, and want to be sure that when we talk about get involved in a place, it's not only a place that it's wealthy and has political power, but that can also lift as many people. So that's why in that piece I'm basically saying I cannot switch lanes, because for me there's no other lane, and one this lane is one that recognizes and celebrates my identities, and that it's only then that we can build an organization and a movement that it's inclusive, that know how to deal with its past, but also lift everyone and fights racism and celebrates diversity. So yeah, that's I guess a long response to your question.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
thank you
I think
so
it's so true. Oh, sorry. Lillian, did you have a follow-up question?
Oh no, I just really appreciate it. It's very inspiring, all the changes you've been making and making the movement more broad and inclusive. It's really cool. Thanks.
Thank you. And I want to clarify, it's not only the changes that I'm making, but of course there's a whole organization, and I'm just lucky and privileged to be at this moment in this position. But it's an ongoing, and I of course I'm here thanks to Giants that opens these doors and these holds in to people like me. So in the same way that I guess a lot of university education and many of you having the right to vote, etc., was thanks to many other people. So, but thank you for that question.
Yeah, I think that was so inspirational, and I totally agree that having the difficult conversations are so important in moving forward. So thank you so much for that. Thomas is asking, Emory students are interested in engaging through service. What are your thoughts on growing Sierra Club's program for service with students and youth in mind?
Well, again, in Georgia, it would be good to go towards that, and having 64 chapters is difficult to know specifically what is happening in each one of them. But again, there is that, and I'm sure many other organizations. In terms of what was the last part of the question, Ari?
Yeah, I think he's interested in your thoughts on how your program is going to actually lead to like service that students are very interested in taking.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, in terms of giving, I mean, I'm sure there's internship programs, etc. We're actually in Sierra Club for a few years. We have been, we don't, I mean, there's a lot of volunteerism that could happen. In terms of formal ways or internships, they're all paid because, what we were seeing, of course, then it's the people that could afford it, then started having all this great training and excelling in many aspects, thanks to that privilege. So we pay for our internships, but certainly there's a lot of room to volunteer and get involved, not only in the Sierra Club, but please do so and form organizations if they're not, and definitely get involved.
I posted the internship program that Sierra Club runs if anybody is interested. And thank you for others that were posting different events and the information. John R. is posting the Sierra Club chapter for specific action campaigns that you can also take part in. There is another question from Gina. I believe many corporations and nonprofits are all looking for sustainability efforts and increasing awareness on social inequities offered to help in some ways. There is a real lack of social media presence. Sometimes there's a lack of knowledge from people, but mostly lack of time. They can really use help with writing, graphics, social media posts, and of course, boots to the ground. Oh, I guess that was, I'm not sure if this is a question, but maybe this
No,
is
yeah, but it's a great comment and a great idea. So please.
Okay, now there are two more questions. Yeah, sorry, thank you. Okay, Caroline has a question.
Okay, do we still have time for questions? That's great. Yeah, thank you so much for the inspiring talk and also for bringing up continually the history and the legacy of the Sierra Club. And I have to say that I am also both fascinated and appalled with John Muir's writings. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, how the Sierra Club can nowadays address and confront the legacy of John Muir specifically.
I mean, if you ask me, I think it's a no-brainer. I don't think anybody should hold sacred any other human being because we all have many flaws. So I think many of the writings of John Muir are very inspiring and were very crucial for to capture and to create that movement for conservation. But there's no perfect humans, and many people would say like, well, it's the product of their times, and we have to understand that. At the same time, there was already a movement that condemned, that coming out of the abolitionist movement. There were real stops and obstacles to provide former slaves with land and with reparations. So it's not an excuse to like completely say, okay, well then that's okay and we can live with it. No, I mean it's a more understanding, and so it has been very polarizing for many in the Sierra Club to have that. How you guys dare to say something about John Muir, and I'm very focused in what is happening now. So I can only learn from the past, and I think it's to focus so much on that. It's probably a waste of time. So, but some people have focused on that. And unfortunately, it has become a lot of, very relevant, even within the board, within the elections of the Sierra Club and all that. And it's, I think, unfortunate because I'm ready to move on to focus on so many other issues. And some people is stuck like 130 years ago.
Okay, thank you. That's been really helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, since we're already at 1:06, if it's okay with you, Ramon, can we have another question?
We're gonna have the last question. Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but Roman?
Yes, hi. Ramon, thank you very much for this, for your time. That's great. And I have a question about consumerism. Basically, from my understanding is most of the environmental impact that we have is from consuming. One of the conversations with equality is to, I guess, raise everybody in the world to a level of affluence, right? Basically, to be to be on the level of maybe the US. Do you guys have concerns about consumerism being the goal of poorer countries to try to achieve what kind of we have here, which is basically one of the reasons for the environmental issues that we have all around the world?
Yeah. I cannot agree more. It's this based on unlimited growth that always basically focuses, assume unlimited resources, and so that whole system is completely screwed in the way of thinking, and that's why the approaches of the Green New Deal, of the Build Back Better is much more responsible in that way. It's a big debate, and I don't have a clear sign, from you, because it's the system that I grew in. I'm a consumer as well, and I think the challenge is how to be much more informed consumer, much more supportive of responsible practices. Say when we were talking about regenerative agriculture, be sure that we support that kind. And that we let our voices heard. But in terms of system changing, I wish it was that opportunity. I don't think we're there now. And I would like to focus into what is possible, because, there's really no time to wait for a revolution to institute. And I'm saying revolution like the way that we refer to them, say in the 20th century, to completely swipe this system. But I believe in the power of people, working together to affect legislation, to affect regulations, look out for, of course, what is happening right now, say with the electric vehicles market. And, we should have been there way before. So it's more like how we can bring all that technology to improving that consumer society that we're kind of like trapped in, but that I think it could be improved and become much better.
Do you think the schools are the kind of source for that? Because I don't see, like, I have a 5-year-old and I don't see anything in the schools. Like, it's more of a fight in the schools to try to show them an example of how to not reuse plastic or to eat food that is more sustainable.
Yeah, well, in a system that commercializes education as well as healthcare, it's difficult to do that. No, there are alternatives, but it's for the more privileged ones. So I think the answer is definitely in education. But I would argue that what we have in the US, at least, it's not always like real education when it's so commercialized and where it's for profit. So
does the Sierra Club
Emory
has any programs for education, like to be something in schools, some program that it's pushing to be mandatory in schools? Math is mandatory.
Sorry?
Math is mandatory, and I think it's important, but not as important. So.
Yeah, well, we do have outings program, for example, that are excursions into different, that's again organized by local chapters and groups. And there is certainly environmental education into a lot of what we do. And again, it's a multi-medium approach, I guess, in terms of dealing with education, young people, but also, not so young, and getting involved in legislation and different aspects, so, but yeah, good luck with educating your 5-year-old.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, please give a round of applause virtually or actually. And thank you so much, everybody, for the discussion. We are almost out of time, but we will be back exactly a month from now on March 18th with the award-winning author, Mr. Kim Stanley Robinson, whose work includes the Ministry for the Future. So I hope you will stay safe and healthy. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you in a month.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and there's March 2nd with Care Climate. I am sorry about that. Yes, that is actually coming up earlier. So thank you so much, Ramon, and thank you, everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Emory, thank you for leading this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erin, and everyone.
Thank you.